You want to have a relationship with someone? You want someone around you can trust? You want someone around you can tie your life to in this way that weaves a rope? Do you want someone you can grow old with? Do you want someone to be a mother for your children, assuming you want children? And if you don't want children, well, you probably will. And if you don't, you're either deluded or immature. So, and you might say, well, no, the planet has too many people on it. It's like, yeah, whatever. Good luck with that. And so every single one of your ancestors reproduced in an unending procession lasting 3.5 billion years. And they're all wrong and you're right. It's like, I don't think so. You kind of want to tangle your life together with someone, because you have someone to, well, it's like two ropes that are tangled together. It's stronger, especially during times of weakness. And you have two brains instead of one. And that actually turns out to be really helpful when things are complicated. And it builds a solidity into your life and a reality into your life to have someone who's along with you on this very long voyage. And so I think that deepens your life in a way that isn't really possible with fragmentary relationships as a single person. If you're civilized enough so that people don't shun you and you have people around you, then they're going to be always telling you how to not be too insane. Well, if you're alone, you drift. Right. You drift, right. And you'll drift in the direction of your biggest weakness. We're social animals, man, right to the core. Sure. And it's a suboptimal solution for the vast majority of people. Because women are hypergamous, they want males who are of equivalent or higher status than them socially. And the same isn't true in reverse. And so what that seems to indicate is that women, and the data bears this out, by the way, women are not happy if they are associated with a relatively low status partner in comparison to their own status. And what that seems to me to mean is that to some degree, it's incumbent on women to support their husbands to the degree that's possible in achieving and maintaining the status that would make them as women satisfied. Look, women have to express aggression somehow unless you're willing to say that they're not aggressive. They tend not to do it physically, not to the degree men do, so they use other channels. And what other channels are there other than physical aggression if you're going to be aggressive? Well, you go after people verbally. You go after them with innuendo and gossip and reputation destruction. And that's how it works.
And just to be clear, that you think that's predominantly a female modus operandi?
It isn't that I think that.
Well,
it's that the clinical literature indicates that. It isn't that I think it.
Well, I'm not interviewing the clinical literature. I'm interviewing you. What do you think?
Well, I'm a psychologist and a scientist, and I tend to base my opinions on what I've read in the broad, relevant clinical literature. I'm not making this stuff up. I studied antisocial behavior for like 15 years. I'm actually quite an expert on it.
Women were oppressed for centuries.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that men and women were oppressed for centuries. I mean, there are certain burdens that women bore that men didn't bear, but the opposite is equally true. Yeah, men suffered dreadfully, for example, in incredibly dangerous occupations.
But is a fact that women suffered more than men?
I don't believe that, no, and I don't think it is a fact. I think that most people suffered by modern standards immeasurably, and that I don't buy the historical narrative that the fundamental reality of our history was that men were oppressing women. First of all, women aren't that easy to oppress, as you might have noticed if you've ever had a relationship with them. And you might say, well, it took women a long time to struggle forward until they attained civil rights status that was equivalent to men, and I would say that's true, but it also was the case for men that it took a very long time to struggle forward before there was anything approximating individual rights, and that they were granted to women quite rapidly in the aftermath of that. Yeah, you can be a man or a woman, that's your choice, and you can change it whenever you want. But we're going to have a new rule, which is that XYs cannot hit XXs.
Yes.
Men or women.
XX person.
Doesn't matter.
Yes.
How's that? And maybe they can't run in running contests against them, and maybe they can't play tennis against them, and maybe that's just reasonable. One of the questions I've been asked quite repeatedly on the last tour is, how do I find the person who's right for me on social media, dating platforms, or just in the general world? I don't know how to answer that question. How do you find the person that's right for you? But I can say, generically, that's not a good question. It's the wrong question. And if you pose the question like that, you will not find an answer. The right question is, how can I make myself into the most attractive possible mate with young men A huge part of the answer to that is clean up your room, put your life in order.
Make your bed.
Start there at least. What you're aiming at is highly productive generosity with some spine. Any 12-year-old boy, 13-year-old boy can now see more beautiful naked women in 15 minutes than the richest king in history ever saw in his whole life. You think, well, you know, we don't have to worry about that. It's like, yeah, you have to worry about that. That's a huge problem, and it's a demoralizing problem because it offers an easy way out. There's some additional problems with divorce that people don't really grasp when they're young. Like the idea that you can be divorced once you have children, that's kind of a stupid idea because you can't. You can find a limited substitute for your initial freedom. But if you have kids and you try to get divorced, the probability that that's going to demolish your life is very, very high. First of all, it's incredibly expensive. So one or both of you is going to come out of that poor. And your market value has declined. Let's say you're the woman who takes the kids. Your market value has declined radically. You're going to be poorer. The man, he's just as screwed because he is now an indentured servant and there's no escape from it. And it's not so bad if you can negotiate a peaceful separation, and some people can, but lots of times if you have a terrible relationship, it's not like negotiating a peaceful separation is all that easy. But if you're at each other's throats, good luck to you. I think it's roughly equivalent to having non-fatal cancer. Everywhere I go, I'm stopped by people, at least a dozen times a day. I would say 5 times an hour. They're often young men, but not all. Almost all of them are exceptionally polite when they approach me. They'd like to have a picture, they'd like to talk to me, and they'd like to tell me why their life is substantially better since they've encountered my work. Imagine what your life would be like if everywhere you went, what people did was come up to you and thank you because what they did helped you not commit suicide and get out of your addiction and stop being alcoholic. Take responsibility for your life and try to put your family together, and that things are much, much better, and that they're often in tears. It's not something that makes you angry, it's something that makes you hurt.
It's not making you angry now?
It's hurtful to see how much need there is for that in society, and how unfortunate it is that people need such a small amount of encouragement to lift themselves out of those sorts of places of hell. And it is irritating to me, I would say, that men in particular, young men, have been discouraged to the point where that's such a common occurrence, when they need so little encouragement to move forward in a productive and progressive direction. Right. I've thought too that love in some sense is the grace of God, you know, is that if you're in a relationship with someone that's characterized by love, you see each other in some deep sense, and you can't see other people like that because you don't have the ability. But it's not like the love is a delusion. It's the opposite of a delusion.
Exactly. And that's the interesting thing. What they're robbing people of is the most beautiful thing, which is the ability to emote for somebody else, and to invest yourself in something.
Well, and also to live in that condition. I mean, if you're around someone that you love, and that love defines the relationship, there isn't any better thing you can do.
No.
And so then to minimize that, to call it some sort of biological or biochemical aberration, which is the worst form of unconscionable reductionism, is to reduce the highest possible goal to something that's nothing but like a trivial consequence of some underlying materiality. It's appalling, and it's really demoralizing. It's like the older I get, the more I understand that marriage and family are of primary importance. And the more I see women in particular, you know, they hit 35 or 40 and they're not married and they don't have kids and they are not happy. Because what the hell are you going to do from the time you're 40 till the time you're 80? You got no family? You got no relationships? What are you going to do? Go run your company. Yeah, well, if you're 1 in 1,000, that'll satisfy you. So you bloody well better make sure you're that 1 in 1,000, and you're probably not, because those people are rare. So I would say to young men who are irritated at women is, if you're irritated at women, you know, as a class of creature, there's something wrong with you, because they're right. You're wrong. They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right. What you have to understand is that, what do you expect from women? If you got pregnant because you had sex, you'd be pretty damn choosy too. So, you know, clue in a bit, and then, well, don't they find you attractive? Well, maybe you're not. Like, have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? You know, people say, well, if the possibility of divorce is open, it makes you free. It's like, yeah, that's what you want. You want to be free, eh? Really? Really? So you can't predict anything. That's what you're after. It's a vow. And it says, look, I know that you're trouble. Me too. So we won't leave, no matter what happens. Well, that's a hell of a vow, but that's why it's a vow, right? That's why you take it in front of a bunch of people. That's why it's supposed to be a sacred act. It's like, what's the alternative? What's the alternative? Everything is mutable and changeable at any moment. Well, go ahead. You live your life like that and see what you're like when you're 50. Jesus, it's dismal. 2 or 3 divorces, your family's fragmented, you've got no continuity of narrative. And it's not good for the kids, not by any stretch of the imagination.